Hey everybody, how are you doing today? I am doing pretty great. We've just come back from a holiday and my classroom is getting super close to ready to go, so I think I'm feeling ready for school. I'd love to hear how you guys are all feeling about that, or if you're even back in school yet already. But what I want to talk to you about today is long range planning. So that can go by a lot of different names. It can go by previews. Um, now, of course, I'm drawing a blank on all the other ones, but I've heard them all. And they can be really overwhelming because you're having to plan for your whole entire year. So this is a session I've done a few times before for local teachers, and I think that what comes out is really that people just aren't sure what needs to go in them. So today we're going to go through what I feel are some possibilities that you could put into them, some questions you need to ask your administrators, and all of the steps that I use when I'm creating mine. I'm just going to confirm that things are working good on Facebook here. Good, I have sound. Last week I did not, so I'm happy that that's there this week. And we will switch our screen here. Okay. Perfect. All right, so here we go. So hopefully you should see me down in the corner in that little bubble there. As we're going along, if you're watching live, I would love to hear your questions. And if you're watching the replay, you can always throw your questions in as well. So the first question, of course, is what is long-range planning? It is required by each and every teacher. And in my district, it's usually due in mid-October. So it's not something that you have to have done the first week of school. You definitely have some time to sort this out. The purpose of these plans is to familiarize yourself with what you're required to teach and to purposefully think about your vision for the year. So this is really, even though it can sound like an assignment for you, it can really be a valuable process to help you sort out where you're going in the year. It helps you to gauge your progress towards your end goal. So of course we have this curriculum that we need to teach, and we have only a certain amount of time to do it in. So by creating this plan where you space it out, you can really be thinking about the length that things are going to need to take, and if you're actually keeping track with that, especially if it's your first year teaching a grade, you're really not sure how long some units are going to take to complete. So this is a great way to reflect back and see how you're doing with your goals and where you thought you would be. And it's something that I reflect back on throughout the year all the time, actually. And it provides you with a sense of comfort and security in knowing what you'll teach. In order to create these plans, you are going to need to go through your curriculum pretty deeply. And I'll talk a little later about how I recommend you going into the grade below and grade above. So by the end of completing these, you should know your curriculum inside and out, which can be really comforting to know exactly what you're doing and boost your confidence in that. And for my district, you need to have 2 copies. So a copy will be kept by you in your classroom, and then a second copy is kept at the office. The purpose for this can vary. The biggest reason is if for some reason you were unable to continue teaching and somebody else had to come into your classroom, they would be able to look at these plans and could see, okay, they've already taught this, this, and this. Here's where they were planning on going, so that the kids would be able to carry on with things they haven't covered, and the teacher wouldn't be having to guess about what was done already or not. The other reason is your administrator might go through these. It's not considered as sort of evaluation in my district. In other places it may be, but they might want to go through and see what your planning looks like and ensure that you're meeting all of the pieces you need to be meeting. So just a little joke for us. It's good to think ahead. I found this one funny because it says we usually do our long range planning at the last minute. And of course that's exactly the point of this is that we don't want to be doing things at the last minute. We want to be looking forward, seeing what's coming up, and having that plan so that we know where we're going and we're not like these guys here. So some things to consider. Before you can even do your planning, you really need to think about some of the aspects of your classroom. For example, your class environment. So these are some images from my previous classroom, and you can see that I had a mixture of desks and tables. It was fully flexible seating. That meant that my kids did not have their items stored in a desk. Their supplies were in a different area. We did a lot of collaboration. So those things play into how I plan. In that first image there, it talks about voice levels and about attentive listening and powerful speaking. We do a lot of presentation and group discussion in my room. So when I'm planning for my year, those are things I'm going to be wanting to plan with that in mind. I know that project-based learning, I know that inquiry and presentation is really important and valued to me in my style of teaching, so I need to work those things in through my planning. The other thing is to think about is fostering your classroom community and how you're going to do that. And I'm not going to talk a whole lot about that right now because last week that was really my topic. And so if you wanted to check out last week's video all about planning for the first weeks, then I really recommend you do that if you haven't seen it already. My point though in showing this here is considering in your long-range planning really that first month of school, not so much on the academic side of things, but on the classroom community side of things, and making sure that your learners know your routines, know your expectations, feel safe in your classroom, and feel welcomed and valued before you go into any of that deep and heavy academics. So like I said, last week's video was all about that, and I recommend you check that one out if you want to know more about that piece. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about class profiles. So this is something that is very common here in my area. I'm not sure how common it is all over the place, but this is an idea that came from the book Learning in Safe Schools, which was written by Faye Brownlee and Judith King. So this is something that we do in our district. I would say by the end of September we have it completed. But basically what it includes is looking at your classroom and the students that are in your room. And so we sit down together, the teacher, usually some administration, learning assistants, and we talk about these things that I have pre-planned. So we discuss what are the strengths of my classroom as a whole? What are my students really good at? And then we talk about some goals. What are you hoping to see most from or in your students that year? So maybe you have noticed in the first few weeks of school that your class just has a really difficult time with self-regulation. Or maybe you can tell that they're just a really hesitant bunch of kids and you want to boost their confidence in their public speaking. So whatever those kinds of things are that you're looking for, and you're noticing your kids are maybe struggling with, are what you're going to put into your class profile plans. And I always like to include a personal goal in there as well. Some examples of some goals I've had in the past are that I wanted to teach a lesson somewhere other than my classroom once a month, or that I really wanted to look at performance-based assessment and proficiency scale. So I don't think those things are required, and I don't know if that's necessarily what Faye and Judith are hoping for out of this, but I find that's something I like to include and talk about and see how that my own professional goals are going to link in with the student goals as well. And then there's quite a lengthy piece about classroom needs. So what are your students needing help with and who can help them? And this is really where the bulk of the time goes into with your class profile, and you would list out your students who have academic issues, social emotional concerns, medical concerns, and discuss the supports that you have in place or need to put in place, or the people you need to support your kids. And this is a living document, so it can change all year long. You can reflect back on it, pull it out as kids come and go, or as students make growth or fall back. But it's a very valuable piece to look at your class of students as a whole. So of course this is not something you can do until you have your students in your room. But I do find it to be a very, very valuable task to complete. So it's all out of this book, like I mentioned. They do have a really nice template in there that you can follow, but essentially you just want to make a web with all of these branches off of it. And if that's something you're interested in knowing more about, you can always send me an email and we can talk more about class profiles. Or if there's lots of people after it, maybe we can do another session like this too. Okay, so before you can begin this long-range planning, there's a lot of things you're going to need. So you want to have a copy of your local standards, whether you have it online or printed or whatever works for you, but you definitely need to have your curriculum nearby you. Any beginning of year assessments that you've done, again, that's something I talked about last week. You want to make sure with your district or your school what's required for data collection, as well as doing whatever you want for your own needs, but probably some reading assessments, writing assessments, math, spelling. So all of those sorts of things should be with you so you can be looking at your students' needs. If you have any students in your class that have individualized education plans, you probably would want to have those with you as you're doing this planning. Your class profile that we just talked about. Any timetables or schedules that you have should be near you. And not only your own timetable of when you're teaching language arts or math or those sorts of things, but also whole school schedules or plans. So if you have any like special whole school events that are scheduled out for the whole year, you want to know about those things. Any teacher guides you might be using. So definitely don't need to reinvent the wheel with all of your planning. There's some amazing resources out there. And if they've already put some pacing guides into their plans, then use those. So have that stuff nearby. Your school district calendar is another really important piece to have with you. You're going to reference that quite a bit in your planning. And then some sort of calendar to mark up. So whether it's paper calendars or digital again, but you're going to want to do some writing. What I like to do is make a Excel file that has all of the months in it, and I just edit it digitally, but paper totally works too. All right, so now you've got all those things, you're at your kitchen table, you've got your coffee or your beverage of choice, and you're ready to get to work. So step one in this process is to set some learning goals. You want to spend some time reading the local standards for each and every subject area that you teach. And you want to be really clear on what the language means, because sometimes it can be a little bit open-ended or vague. So what I recommend is that you read it thoroughly once, and then you're going to read it again if you've got that paper version, making notes in the margins, otherwise making some notes just on some lined paper in a notebook. If you, again, have that paper version, you might want to use some highlighters to link commonalities. So what I found with our recently revised curriculum here in British Columbia is that we went away from our old standards where we had really kind of clearly defined units in social studies. And the new stuff is just really open-ended. And so there was lots of different ways you could combine these to make units of learning. And so what I found helpful was anything that I just thought went together, I marked with a certain color of highlighter. And then that helped me to kind of pull out what I wanted my units to be. And as you're going through this, you need to answer some questions. So question 1 is, what am I supposed to teach? 2, what are my students supposed to learn? And be really, really clear on those. And if you're not clear on them, then I would suggest talking to some other teachers in your area of the same grade. So maybe make some notes, or again, with a different color of highlighter, highlight those pieces or star them up or whatever, and take them to somebody and say, hey, what does this standard really mean? What do you expect kids get out of it? So that you know as well. And then step 2 is to choose a format. Now, normally when I have done this session locally here in the past, I have had lots of different teachers in our school provide me with their previews so that people could look at all the different versions. So I do definitely recommend asking around in your school and saying, hey, how do you do your previews? What does your long-range planning look like? Can I look at it? Because there's so many different formats that this could take. It's really important to point out that some administrators are going to have elements that they want to see included, but your planning is really for you. It's not for them. So make sure that whatever format you're choosing works for your style of thinking, because if it's not working for you, then it's not going to have that full value. Decide if you would like to go digital with your planning or not. I find that I always start pencil and paper and then turn it into digital. And then consider some options. So you can do some charts and some tables. You could have things in a vertical or a horizontal fashion. I really like to see my year vertically, from September to June, kind of all in a long line. It depends on how your thinking goes. You perhaps might want a web, either a branch for each month, or maybe within a subject you have each big idea off of a web, and anything else that might work for you, your curriculum, your students. So it's really open-ended for how this can look. I just need you to know that it's got to be valuable to you and your way of thinking. So some things you may want to include. Now, your principal will probably tell you some things that they expect to see. We had a big meeting at my school a few years ago about what was really expected as the minimum or the essentials. So there may be a list floating around your school of those kind of expected pieces. But if there isn't something, you can always ask and make sure that you are including everything that they want to see. But some things you might want to include your classroom management plan. So when there's behaviors in your room, what is the way that you deal with that going to look like? What is your first kind of responses, and then your next level of response? When does parent contact come in? All of those sorts of pieces. Your weekly timetable should probably be included somewhere in your long-range planning. Again, if another teacher has to come in and take over your classroom for whatever reason, then that's something that they'll be wanting to see. Your principal probably wants to see as well how you're scheduling out your week to make sure that you're adding a fair amount of time for all subjects. Timelines for units or themes or subjects or however you're wanting to teach should be included. And of course, this is kind of the big one, evidence of planning for the standards. So you have to be showing how you are going to meet the pieces of curriculum. I like to list the main resources that I'll be needing. So if there's a certain math textbook that I want, not down to the little nitty-gritty things, like if we're talking math, I'm not going to be writing pattern blocks and cues and error rods and all of those things, but I would maybe write Math Makes Sense textbook, student whiteboards, like those are bigger pieces that I use. If there's any other professional reads, I can't think of the author right now, but there's a book called Good Questions for Teaching Math that I use often. So those would all be kind of main resources I would include. Again, not those little pieces, like not all the math manipulatives and things. Any assessment strategies that you're going to use. I include those for each unit. I find that throughout it really can kind of get a little bit repetitive, so I'm saying things like whole class discussion, tickets out the door, unit tests, kind of over and over. But it's good to be thinking about all those pieces and how they work for your units. And I like to think about the assessment as learning, for learning, and of learning, and I break my assessment strategies down into those 3 categories. How you'll integrate technology, you may want to include, especially if that's a big focus in your professional development or in your district. Ways that you'll differentiate for different types of learners, that might be part of your class profile as well. And then this is one of the pieces that came out when we were talking about things, and it really isn't part of your long-range planning, but for ease we just chose as a school to keep it in that same package, is some sort of an emergency sub-package. So just in case, for whatever reason, you cannot make it to school for a day and you just don't have time to plan, you've got that ready to go. So we just decided that you either included it in your long-range planning binder or a sticky note in there that told the principal where in your classroom it could be found. So whether it gets included in that planning package or not, definitely I do think that's a good idea to have. It's something that I've never used, but it's there for me if I need it. Okay, we're on to step 3, which is to mark up a calendar. So what you want to do is you want to mark off any holidays, special school days, reporting periods. So take out your spring break, your winter break, your day for Thanksgiving. If you have any professional development or other non-instructional days, cross all of those times off. Don't forget about all of the special days and how you might need a few days before for pre-teaching. So you might want to put in some little notes about, for example, like Terry Fox Day, Orange Shirt Day, or Remembrance Day. I like to spend a couple of days before those events discussing them and teaching about them in my room. So I need that a little bit of extra time to talk about that stuff. The other thing is Christmas. So really the 2 weeks leading up to Christmas, you're probably going to be doing a lot of Christmas activities, or there's caroling going on in your classroom or your school, or you're working on a school play. So think about all of that pre-teaching before those special events too. And once you've got that winter break, spring break, some author visits, field trips, or whatever else kind of marked in there, you're going to be able to see truly how much or how little time you really have, because it really does fill up quick. And 10 months sounds like a lot of time, but you know, you take out that winter and spring break and you're down to 9 and all the rest, and it just kind of, it goes fast. So marking it out gives you that really good visual of the amount of time you do have to accomplish things. And then this is the point we talked about before, was that buffer zone around holidays as well. Okay, step 4 is to look for some commonalities. Especially in the primary grades, you're likely to teach around themes, but I do feel like that's becoming more common with our new curriculum and with the importance of inquiry-based teaching. So thinking about some ways that you can integrate things is kind of what we're talking about here. So what time of year is best for some certain themes? If you've got plants in your curriculum, you probably don't want to be trying to grow plants in January, at least not where I live. It's about 40 below here sometimes, so plants not going to do so great. Cultures might be something that's nice or suited for the beginning of the year, as you're kind of doing all that getting to know you sort of stuff. So just be thinking about those pieces. And also think about if there's certain content that needs to be understood before you can move forward. So, for example, in my curriculum, I have explorers. I really feel like you have to teach mapping first. It's hard for kids to understand the distances that these explorers were traveling if they have no idea what the world looks like and they have no idea how big the oceans were. Another example here is if students don't understand addition, you probably can't be moving on to multiplication. So there's kind of an order to how some things need to be taught. some subjects might be easier for you, so it might be really laid out into the units. Like we had kind of talked about before with that highlighting and looking for some commonalities. And again, I really recommend you use any programs that are available in your building. So just 3 listed here are the Daily 5, Jump Math, or 6 Traits of Writing. But those things are all really, really excellent programs. They have been tested for you. Lots of them even have scripted lessons in them. And that whole pacing guide is really figured out. So don't reinvent the wheel if you don't have to. A lot of it can have been done for you. Okay, step 5 is to integrate. You want to consider any areas where you can integrate and combine your subject areas. A benefit of this is you're going to see deeper understanding from your students. They're going to be, when they transfer their learning from one area to another, like that, but it's also going to save you valuable time. I really, truly don't know how teachers can tackle all of the curriculum in the year when they don't integrate. I can't fathom teaching it all separately and getting it all done. So some examples that I came up with for you is that when you're doing your guided reading groups, they could be reading about science or social studies content. Fractions could be taught during your music lessons. Informational writing is your science fair project. I could go on and on and on about the benefits of science fair projects, but you can talk about your lots of math and your graphing in there as well, all of your presentation skills. So there's lots of different things you can integrate there. And then just another really simple fun one is you can practice your basic math facts in the gym. So I always tell my kids as they're coming in how many laps I want them to run. But you could say run 9 minus 5 laps today, or squat 4 by 5 times. And so they have to kind of think and be like, okay, I got to squat 20 times. So it doesn't have to be huge integrations, but think about all the different ways you can integrate that learning. Like I said, you're going to get some deeper learning out of it, but you're going to be able to tackle so much more content at once. And step 6 is kind of the big one. It's the year-long step. You want to review, revise, and adjust. So looking at, are you considering every outcome? Is there something that you forgot? You want to adjust any areas or months that look too full or too empty. So when you kind of look across all of your subjects, you don't want to have some really heavy science, some really heavy math, and a huge language arts project all going on at once. Also, sometimes, especially with math, I find some units take so much longer to complete than others. Probability is really only a week-long kind of a thing, whereas multiplication might take us 6 weeks to get through, maybe even longer. So thinking about all of those pieces and does the timing that you have really look realistic? Tidy things up so that you can read it. Probably your first draft is going to be a little bit messy. That's okay. If you're doing this digitally, you can use some color coding, some bold type, italics, or whatever else to really clear it up for you. And remember, this is a working document. It is not set in stone. You will change this. That classroom copy, I usually write things on it in pencil and go like, oh, that took way longer than I thought. I need till mid-November for this. Or this finished up really early. Probably could be done by middle of May. Whatever it is, make those notes and keep it so that when you teach that same grade again, you don't have to remember back. You've got it all written out for you. But like I said, it's kind of that year-long process, and I'm constantly changing things, even several years into teaching the same grade. I'm not just handing back those same long-range plans year after year. I am making some changes to them. Granted, they're smaller changes than in the beginning, but I'm always changing this document. Okay, so that's kind of the end of the steps there, but what I do want to let you know about is some free resources I have for you when you're continuing on your planning. So if you go to my website, funandforth.ca, and you scroll down, you're going to see these 3 colored boxes. And the middle blue one is all about my free resource library. So if you're not a member of that yet, what you want to do is click that Get Access button, and it's going to take you to this page where you need to type in your email address and your first name. And when you hit submit or confirm, it will send you a confirmation email. So you confirm one more time. It's just a legality kind of thing we have to do with emails. But then what's going to come your way is an email that has the link and the password to the resource library. So it takes a few minutes for that, and I'm actually finding people who sign up with their work emails, it's taking a little bit longer. I think it just has to go through your school spam filters and things. So it's not quite instant, but it does come pretty quick, usually within 5 minutes. And when you have that, you go into my free resource library. There's tons of good stuff in there for you guys, but the two first pieces there really relate to long-range planning. So the training video is basically this session kind of in the fast mode. It's about less than 10 minutes, that one. But if you just want to recap later and you don't want the long version again, that's a nice one that you can look at. And then beside it, the editable long-range plans is one you definitely want to go check out, because one of the drawbacks of doing this digitally here is that I can't show you really what my plans look. I can't pass my binder over to you and let you look through it. But what I've done there is I've included a sample of my grade 4 long-range plan. I've also included an editable version of that year plan so that you can create your own, perhaps based off mine or not. And then I've included kind of my detailed version where I break it down with all of the outcomes and those resources I'm using, my assessments and everything, and I've included a sample of that for a subject and then an editable template for you as well. So that's probably your best one to check out there. It's totally free. You just need to go, like I said, to my website, funandforth.ca, find the resource library and sign up. And there's tons of other good stuff in there for you as well too. So that brings us to the end of things here. If you have any questions for me at all, please either comment on this video, or you can always send me an email. It's angela@funandforth.ca, and I would definitely love to help you out further with this. If you want me to take a look at your things, see if you want to kind of bounce some ideas off of me or whatever, I would love to do that for you. I really wish you some success in your school year again. Thank you so much for joining me. Have an awesome day, and I will talk to you later. Bye.